Hey everybody, it's your host Anchorman back again with another episode of Top Shelf, and I want to first of all thank everyone who watched the last episode on why you shouldn't see Ghostbusters, and I said in that particular video why I wouldn't be seeing the film in theaters and why you shouldn't either. But before we get into this week's topic, I want to clarify what I said in last week's show. Now, I want to preface this video by saying I'm not advocating that you not see the new Ghostbusters movie, but rather you do not go see it in theaters. I'm in no position to tell you what to see or not see, but there are other methods of seeing this movie rather than just in the theater. Like personally, I'll eventually wait to see it on Blu-ray when it hits, and I'm sure many of you will pirate the movie. What I really want to emphasize though is that for the greater cultural good, on July 15th, 2016, that you either stay home or go see another movie, or really do anything else than go see Ghostbusters. Nowhere did I tell you to pirate the movie or not to see the film. All I said is that I was going to see it through Blu-ray and others may pirate the film. I didn't tell you to not watch the movie, I just said not to see it in theaters and to wait. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. I have no authority over you, but I will tell you what I think and what I'm going to do. So for this week's episode, we're going to be talking about VR. Now, I am a skeptic of VR. Before we get started, I want to let you guys know I've tried out a few VR headsets, so I'm not coming from the position of one who hasn't even tried it, and I'm just shitting on it to be a hipster, or actually rather, would hipsters actually be in favor of VR because it failed once before? Anyway, there's a few problems with VR that I feel get swept under the rug or just ignored because they just don't fit the media narrative. Like any new piece of tech, in trying to sell said tech to consumers, there's the immortal conundrum that always lingers: the issue of support. When a new console is put on the market, you have to balance industry support and consumer support, and that's a tricky thing to do because they're linked hand in hand. Industry support are things like third-party games, apps, regular updates, and such that appeal to consumers to even join the platform. Consumer support are people who buy the console, the games, and regularly use the platform in turn that make a console look appealing to the industry support because they want to have access to those gamers. Now, Xbox and PlayStation really don't have this problem anymore in the console market because they are established names and both have these support systems. But suppose we're trying to sell a new platform. Let's say with motion controls that launches we launch a system for $299. What we would need to do is establish support from both the consumers and the industry. To woo the industry to create products for our platform, we need to appeal to them with things like hardware power, fiscal incentives, and reassurance of consumer support to come. And for the consumer support, we need to prove to the gamers that our system will have games by making our own exclusive games, new features, a lower price, and the assurance of long-term support by the industry. The problem is, how do we get both the consumers and the industry to back our product at the same time when they're relying on the other to move first? And that's the current problem VR is going through prior to launch. How do we get the mass market in on this? Getting third-party developers to take a gamble on a platform that hasn't been proven to be a real moneymaker is a tough sell for a measly promise of people to come. As we've seen this generation, developers don't want to take any unnecessary risk, let alone for peripherals that if they really don't need to do for. And as a response, gamers are a bit wary of jumping on a product that has with no proven long-term industry support. Now, VR has taken some big strides as of this last E3, with Bethesda jumping in the ring with support for the HTC Vive, and studios like Rocksteady making experiences for PSVR, but even then, that's not enough. And by far the biggest issue with VR, one that needs to be addressed before any discussion of long-term viability as a product could even be considered, is the lack of AAA games. So far, most of the games that have been announced for VR are short little titles that are lacking in content. Sony has gotten used to using the term experiences, which accurately sums up the term. The games announced so far that are built for VR are really just short little 20-minute demos to get you down with the concept, but are really kind of the equivalent of Wii Sports in terms of depth. It's enough to get you the hang of the system, but not really take advantage of it. And while a few games have been announced for VR support with major titles like Resident Evil 7 or Doom, these are at best just half-assed support methods. Developers will still be developing their games for traditional setups, with VR really being an afterthought. They aren't designing their games around VR to be VR exclusive titles, like with Kinect support, think of it that way. At the launch of the Xbox One, games like Dead Rising 3 and Battlefield 4 had Kinect support, but because those games weren't built around the hardware, the experience was found lacking and really missed out on some great opportunities. While these smaller games and indie experiences are great, they are but appetizers compared to the entrees being AAA games. The mass market buys a system primarily to play AAA games, and if VR could only offer some indie experiences and a few AAA games with VR support, that's going to be a tough sell. And the last issue I kind of want to point out is the issue of power that people seem to be ignoring. As someone who has tried out the VR headsets, the only plausible VR experience I have is with the HTC Vive, and that's mainly because it had the power to back up the demand. But 1080p 60 FPS is still too low for a decent VR experience because the screen is so close to your face. These systems need to have hardware behind them to back up the visuals and support the graphical power needed to run more intense games. A side effect of this lack of power is the nausea currently being experienced by PSVR users, where the launch hardware just can't deliver enough power for 1080p 60 FPS, and to an extent it's also an issue of Oculus. And some may suggest just beefing up the hardware, but then you run into another issue of price. The more power you start packing, the more expensive the system will be, or the cost of entry will be. That's certainly going to be an issue, and we'll have to see how these manufacturers will handle it. Anyway, guys, that's our show. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I love making these little short videos from time to time. I hope you guys really do enjoy this series. Let me know in the comment section below what you would like me to talk about, and we will see you on the next episode of Top Shelf.